We heard many difficult issues today, and I think something that comes out of all this discussion is how complex every situation that we face is. And either we are speaking about a particular department, an organization, bigger company, or a country that I will speak, the complexities are there. And very importantly, the trade-offs. By doing something, there is something else that probably you do not do. Right? So I was asked today, after this extremely interesting for me, fascinating, extremely thoughtful day, to bring you a little bit up with what's going on about the Greek economy, because after this meeting, you're going to have a very nice bus ride through Athens. So when we try to speak about economies, most of the times what we do is we are relying on one particular metric, which is called the gross domestic product. And we see how countries behave on that. And IMF comes and gives forecasts, and everybody says, wow, things are good, or we're going to have a terrible year. And you see here, I included some countries, neighbors, competitive countries that essentially went through different things with us. And you see that Greece actually in 2021, that is the last metric, is doing very, very well. I mean, it had a growth of 8.5. This is fantastic. But take a look of this area between 2008 and 2014. And you see the very, very big problem of Greece. Right? And the tremendous impact of the financial crisis. And I was thinking, maybe I can give you several numbers here, and then you go out and you don't remember any of them. And then I thought that given what we are discussing, given about the complexities, I will try to offer you what we have at IMD as an economic ecosystem. When we try to think about why a particular country is quote unquote successful, the first question that comes in mind is, what do we mean by success? What is it? So we are working with a concept which is called competitiveness. And we say, okay, success is for a country to be competitive. What does that mean? That means that a country has the capacity to use its resources, use its competencies in order to create sustainable value. And I open a parenthesis here and I say that given that this sustainable value will be created, this will enhance the prosperity of all the citizens. So this is the idea, right? And the model that we use is actually quite intuitive. What we say is that competitiveness, which essentially is how we rank different countries, right, is actually relies on 4 pillars. First of all, we have the government. We're speaking about the government efficiency. The government efficiency is essentially the way that a government builds the landscape within which the private sector creates value, right? And in just a few minutes ago, we were listening George saying, you know, actually, the UK government building the landscape, they screwed up, right? I mean, this is what I understood. But then you have the businesses who come in, and given this screwed up framework, they have actually to be efficient. They have to be profitable. They have to create jobs, right? And therefore, we rely on the business efficiency. But really, the better the infrastructure of a country, the better the roads, the better the technology, the better the educational system, the better the health system. Obviously, the efficiency of the government and the efficiency of the business sector are much higher, holding everything else constant. And finally, all these factors end up giving us some KPIs, which essentially give us what the economic performance of a country is. What's going on with investments, what's going on with trade, what's going on with labor, and so on. Are you with me? Okay, so this is the picture of Greece, the ranking of Greece relative to 63 other economies, right? So in 2022, Greece was 47, while last year it was ranked 46. And everything else follows from there. One disclaimer. When we see statistics, and I don't know, maybe you're very bright and you can see through the lines, but most of us, the rankings, we think that they're similar to football championships. You get the first country, this year was Denmark, and everybody else is a loser. Right? Completely incorrect, completely incorrect. Because every country has its own sources and its own competencies. And very importantly, every country puts an objective, and the objectives are not the same. Therefore, the countries decide upon strategies. And in the end of the day, they have to see how they fare given what they chose, right? So all of this should be in the back of our minds. Right? But nevertheless, these are the numbers, right? You immediately see that infrastructure is the stronger pillar for Greece, right? Government efficiency is the weakest. So all these factors are having several sub-factors. And here, I don't want you to be completely taken by the numbers, but essentially, each factor has 5 sub-factors, which basically explain what's going on with economic performance, for instance. I'm talking about the domestic economy, GDP growth. I'm talking about international trade, international investment, employment, and prices, and so on and so forth. Why I wanted to show you this? Because in essence, all the problems that Greece has and all the strengths that Greece has can come out from this figure. So Greece entered the European Union a few decades ago. Immediately what happened was the exports of Greece became very, quote unquote, expensive. The imports to Greece became very cheap. And of course, Greeks felt very wealthy. So we started consuming a lot. And of course, given this trade-off that I was talking to you about, we needed to get more and more loans. And then the financial crisis came. So in essence, you see here, public finance, we ranked 60 out of 63 countries. What is this? We have a very large debt imbalance, right? So this is one of the very big problems of Greece, the debt imbalance. But at the same time, we have other difficulties, right? We have, for instance, with respect to the government efficiency, we have very high taxes. Not as high that our Prime Minister wants to cut them completely for the high income level, but this is a different story. But we have very high taxes, and of course, if you have very high taxes and the monitoring system of the taxes is not particularly good, what do you have? Exactly, tax evasion. So we have high debt, high taxes, high tax evasion. How do we try to keep in order this? I mean, is everything very, very bad with government efficiency? Actually, not really. We have, in the government efficiency, we find out that we have a business legislation that becomes better and better for the private sector. We have skilled force that is very high in numbers. And essentially, we have an institutional framework that moves forward for the country. Within this framework, we have the business sector. And the business sector, the big problems are actually, George just mentioned, we do not have any training. We do not have a formal apprenticeship program. We do not have internships. Why? Because another problem which is here, 59, is that we have very high unemployment. Therefore, you don't need to train. You have high skill, you have high unemployment, you have very, very high youth unemployment, that is below the age of 25, which is terrible for a country, terrible. And this is what we have to cope with, right? These are the problems. On the other hand, we have worked with the startup days, so the productivity and efficiency becomes better, and essentially companies are managing to incorporate a lot of the digital parts, and therefore this is what we see coming in the future. With respect to the infrastructure, some of the infrastructure, you see, we are about anywhere between 30 and 40 except one, right? So this is not that bad. We are a little bit lower than the average country that we evaluate at IMD. But in essence, what happens is that we do not have the connection between the universities where the research is generated and the private sector where the research is being applied. We do not have, we distrust a little bit the digital aspects. We are not, as individuals, as keen to use many digital applications. Companies are not using very much, as they should, business analytics, big data sets, and so on and so forth. And this, of course, what does it do? It creates a situation where there are fewer services from the e-government, and there is fewer participation in these e-services. Right? So these are the issues. On the other hand, again, with respect to the infrastructure, what we have, you have very high language skills, you have very high life expectancy, you have very high attempt to education, you have a very large number of teachers with respect to the students that are in the class in the elementary school. So these are the good aspects. And then we get into the economic performance. And in the economic performance, I think the challenges are the youth unemployment that we discussed before, the investments, the foreign investments, how we can create a system where foreign direct investments will come more rapidly, and essentially the energy prices, the gasoline prices, which of course these will become only worse, as Amelia said earlier today, right? So this is the idea. What are the good things about the economic performance? Oh, plenty actually. Trade, as you see, has increased substantially, which implies that manufacturing managed during this difficult time to adapt, say certain things, find efficiencies. Right? We have actually the tourist receipts. Tourism is a very big component of our economy, and tourist receipts are increasing very, very much this year beyond the expectations. And essentially, we have that the exports are not concentrated in few products, so there is a lot of diversification of what we export, and we have a very large number of exporting partners. So we are not hostage in one particular, the economy is not hostage in one particular thing. Are you with me so far? Do you know everything about Greece? Excellent. Let me show you 3 graphs, and then I would like to conclude. One of the big problems is bureaucracy. You hear everybody complaining, not only in Greece, we complain in our institutions that we are. George mentioned that before. Well, Greece, and I here have, from 2007 onward until 2022, and you see over there in the end that actually the issue of bureaucracy is getting better and better. I mean, the higher the number, the lower the bureaucracy, right? So from this group of countries, we are behind only of the Netherlands, and I mean Netherlands. On the other hand, and this is very, very important, what you see here is a response to a question that we were asking, how adaptable the government policies are given the economic situation. And you see that exactly 2019 and onward, exactly during the period of COVID, the government has managed to adapt brilliantly well, at least according to the executives that we surveyed. And finally, what I want to show you is the skilled labor. And you see, again, the orange kind of line on the top, that Greece really has a lot of skilled labor available, which means that if foreign direct investments are aligned with good projects, then the skill necessary to operate these things is available. Something that we regularly do, and it is a mistake, is we see a picture, static. We see a number one particular year, and we feel that this is what's going on in the country. And actually, this is not true. And I'm sure that you, in the HR departments, you never just rely on one particular year, but you see the trends. And what I have here is I have the trends of the overall ranking, this is the red line, and the 4 factors for the last 5 years, just to show you and leave you with a good feeling that the things here are becoming better and better, right? I mean, we were 57 in 2018, and we are 47 this year in the overall ranking among these 64 countries, right? And also, if you see the factors, with the exception of infrastructure, which is kind of difficult to advance, the other 3 factors are actually improving. Right? So this is a very, very good picture, if one could say that. Let me take 2 minutes to conclude and give you my opinion about some positive things that I find out from the Greek economy and what are the challenges that may come. So we managed, after a long period of time, to be given the funding necessary, and actually the government used it effectively. And we cope with the issue of COVID-19. The other thing that we show is that there were several reforms in order to do that. The startup, in order to start a company, the steps that one needed to take, plus the days that one needed to wait, both of them decreased. So, and what we see now is that there exists this reform appetite in the country. If you speak with locals, I'm sure that you will get this spirit. Only 2 days ago, I was reading an article about Amazon and the municipality of Naxos, the island of Naxos, which if you have the opportunity to go there during the summer, it's a beautiful island, it's a fantastic island. And this will be the first smart island that will be, in a sense, worked with Amazon. So what we had a digital process to vaccinate that all of us were very, very excited. All these things are very, very good. But there are a couple of issues that we need to keep in mind. And one issue that we have to keep in mind is what I call tragedy of horizon. We've done several reforms that usually these reforms are not easy, but they're more feasible. But the country needs substantial structural changes. They need, for instance, to change the public administration system. They need to change the health provision. They need to change the education. And this, as you can imagine, goes beyond the particular period where a politician is in in leadership. And therefore, why would a politician, why would a CEO undertake an uncertain investment when the results of the investment, the rewards, will come much, much later? They won't. So this is a fundamental problem. How can we solve that? And this is my second observation. We really need to have consensus. We really need, in a period of time where we see countries upon countries being tremendously polarized, we see people who are in favor of two different parties not speaking to each other. What actually I think is needed is precisely this political consensus in order to move forward. And finally, we need to have a good implementation plan, because ideas and strategies are difficult, but in the end of the day, you put them in a piece of paper. Taking the piece of paper and making a reality is an extremely difficult task. I thank you very, very much.
Thank you.